Welcome to the You Can Mentor podcast. I am Zach, and I am here with my friend Dale. Dale, how's it going today?
Doing awesome, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, Dale, you just look like a podcast expert. You've got the headphones on, you've got the polo, you've got the coffee mug. We were talking about it earlier. This is not your first rodeo, is it, my friend?
I've done this a couple times.
I would say so. Okay, so Dale is in Oregon and up near Portland in a city called Independence. You've been married for 26 years. You have three adult daughters and one son. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What a stud. You were a youth pastor for over a decade, and you've got some podcasting experience, and now you are the discipleship director at the Gate Youth in Oregon. So, Dale, it is awesome to have you here, man. I'm so excited to learn more about the Gate, learn more about you, and pick up a couple tips from your experience. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you.
yeah. So Dale, why don't you just start out and just kind of tell us a tad bit about yourself and how you found our podcast and all of that good stuff.
Yeah. Like you said, I've been doing youth ministry for quite some time, and always done some leadership stuff. A lot of Willow Creek Association leadership summit seminars and all those things, and just trying to get better at what we're doing in life. And spent a lot of time under Jim Ramos with the Men in the Arena, running the podcast for him, and did about 7 years there, and then came across this opportunity with the Gate when they needed a youth pastor. And so I checked it out, and there was absolute chaos when I went in there. Kids everywhere, this amazing facility. And I was like, oh man, sign me up for this, grabbed my resume, took it in there, and I got hired about a week later. And so it's been a year and a half now I've been with them, and we got a grant from the federal government to do a mentor program. And so we handpicked some of our staff, identified them as potential mentors, and they had natural relationships with students already. And so we sent them on their way. And my boss, Ben Bobita, said, hey, I've listened to this podcast called You Can Mentor Podcast. You should check it out. So I did. Started back to episode 1 and started listening to those and mandating our staff to listen to those one a week. And then I'd get them together on Thursdays and debrief what they learned and listen to their trials and things that they have going on, and then encourage them on their path. And so we have quite a few students that are being mentored an hour a day or an hour a week, with mixed up between about 15 to 18 staff. And so some of them have 4, some of them have 1, just all depends on their time schedules. But I have 4 boys right now that I mentor, and it's been a cool journey.
That's awesome, Dale. So, I mean, definitely not trying to hate on you, but you are a tad bit older.
Yeah.
And so typically whenever you are going into the youth game, there's a bunch of people who are in the 20s. You can find a couple who are in their 30s, a few in their 40s. But what made you want to get back into the mentoring relationship game, which I love, by the way?
Yeah. The cool thing is, part of my job is I'm also the, as discipleship director, I am in charge of making sure our staff are doing well, healthy, spiritually. I'm available to them. And since there's WU is the college right next to us, Western Oregon University, we get a lot of students from there that work for us. And so, like, if you're a Christian parent, you send your kid off to college, what a great thing. You got this guy that's going to invest in your kids while they're away from home. So I meet them for lunch and, like, how are you doing? I have them, they share their life story with me. And then I know how I can better, journey alongside of them, encourage them, and just challenge them in their life and all that stuff. And so I think when I left youth ministry, my heart's desire really was to equip the next generation. And so I'm able to do that with leadership trainings each week, meeting with them one-on-one. When they have stuff going on, they're like, hey, I need to make an appointment with my discipleship director. we meet up for coffee or whatever, sit down and hear what's going on. I pray for them, encourage them. And it's been really cool just to see the fruit that's come of that.
So you are a disciple who makes disciples, and your disciples make disciples.
Yeah, last night was middle school youth group, and I had one of my youth leaders. She's probably 23, and I had her speak. And we have some others that are like 20, and like we got a Bible study coming up on Thursdays where we get about 35 students come over for the high school and have lunch. And we have another young lady that's going to do that. And we have a city planner that comes and he helps with the Bible study. So we share in that role. But my thing is I want to get some high schoolers teaching the Bible study as we walk through Ephesians. And when we equip them, it's so cool. Like these kids graduate up and then they come back and serve.
Man, that is my favorite model. Whenever you've got this multi-generational mentoring discipleship thing, and it is just so fruitful. Like I love it. So kudos to the Gate for that. So man, I want to get into your organization, the Gate. So the first thing that kind of stuck out to me, Dale, is all of the things that you guys are doing. And you're serving, correct me if I'm wrong, but 400 youth per week, more or less?
Yeah, there's probably more now. We're averaging about 120 students a day that come over. And so our proximity to the high school is literally across the street. There's a crosswalk from the high school to our facility. And then there's the middle school is right behind the high school. So the kids at 3:15 just come flooding through the doors. We check them in. They drop their backpacks. I'm constantly throwing pictures on Instagram of this mound of backpacks. It's just insane. And it's loud and crazy. We feed them. They're playing sports and a ton of kids are coming.
That's awesome. So what is the typical kid who comes into your facility?
As far as their background and whatnot?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, the kids that are very busy in sports and academics, you probably won't see a ton of those, but these kids, a lot of them don't want to go home. They walk through the doors and we greet them with a smile. We love them. The big thing is they're known and they're heard, and we get in their world and we sit with them when they grab a tray of food and they're eating, and we just sit right with them like, hey man, what's going on? How you doing? How's life? Tell me about your day. And so, I mean, how many parents really do take the time to do that with their kids? And we just sit with them and talk, and they share. And if they're struggling with homework, we're like, well, show me what you're struggling with, and we help them through it. And so these kids, some of them are kids that maybe struggle with their identity, and they might think they're something they're not, and we just meet them where they're at and love them. And a lot of them are kids that you would not say are the A crowd kid. And so we just come alongside those kids. A mom came in yesterday, checked her kids in for the first time, and she goes, both of them are on the spectrum a little bit, one more so than the other. And you could look at them and it was obvious. And I said, ma'am, every single kid here is on the spectrum. It's like, they're not unique. And we just love them where they're at. So that's what we do the best, is just love kids. And then eventually they see Jesus.
Yeah. Like, I'm amazed at how it really doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your background. If you're willing to give a kid love, if you're willing to give them attention, affirmation, acceptance, if you're willing to take the time to sit and to listen to them and to make them feel loved, to make them feel known and seen, kind of like what you were saying, that can literally transform a kid's life.
Right.
And I think it's so crazy how in today's world, there's so much going on. People are so busy that there are millions of kids out there who don't have one person who will actually take the time to learn about their life. And so that's an awesome deal for you guys, Dale.
Yeah, one of the things that we're reminded of, and we say this all the time, and it's something we've learned from the podcast, is there's no such thing as a bad kid. There's hurting kids. And so they come and they act out, and we get it. They're acting out because they're hurting. And
Yeah.
so we just got to love them and figure out, why is it that you're doing that? So, last night at middle school youth group, we had a kid that just won't sit still. He's just crazy. And he's all over the place. And so afterwards we talked about it. We're like, well, we have some fidgets. Why don't we give him a fidget during youth group? Let's figure out a way to get him to not distract others because we want him here. And so let's figure out what it's going to take to make that happen instead of like putting the kid in the corner or saying you can't be here.
Well, and like, I feel like it's those kids who almost everywhere they go, whether it's school or whether it's church or whether it's after school programs, they are used to getting kicked out. They are used to older people saying, hey, stop doing that. Don't do that. There's something wrong with you. And so if you can say the opposite, and it obviously it might take some time, but eventually that kid's going to be like, wait a minute, there's something different here.
Yeah.
This guy's patient with me. This is a space where I can actually be myself and receive the acceptance that I'm looking for. And so that's I was there isn't such thing as a bad kid, but whenever I was in 8th grade, I was kind of a bad kid. But I had a youth intern. He was at a college. This guy named Jason, and people at my church didn't much care for Zach Garza. I would get it talking to by all of my pastors and all of my elders often because I just couldn't sit still because I would talk a lot. But this guy Jason came alongside me, and he entered into my world. And I like basketball, and I like this, and I like that, and he connected with me on those things. And there's a reason why I remember his name, 25 years later, and I don't remember the names of those elders because he made time for me. So
that's right. Exactly right.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Okay, Dale. So we probably don't have time to go through all of these, but pick out a couple of your favorites. And what are some of the unique things that you guys do to connect with kids in the following kinds of programs? So the Gate has the after school program, which you've talked about. You have the late night program. You have the quiet space program. You have school year clubs, lunch Bible studies, mentor groups, youth groups, summer activities, and the youth forum. Tell me just some of those that might be unique or might be some of your favorites.
Yeah. So in the main facility, there's just a lot of kids and a lot of noise. And so we got another grant this last year that allowed us to open up a quiet space. So we are in a parking lot with a church. The church has let us use that land. The church doesn't own the Gate or run the Gate, but the pastor and a couple of the people at the church are on our board. But they allowed us to have a space in their church that we call the quiet space. And so students who need help with homework, we have laptops and stuff, and we'll take them over there and they can sit with, there's always 2 adults in there, and they will help them in a quieter, more controlled environment so they can get work done and get help and all that. And so those are those woo students that are in there that are smarter than 51-year-olds, and they can help them with all their work and all that good stuff. So that is a really cool place. Or if a kid just like, I want a quiet place to hang out and just play cards, they can do that as well. So that's one of the great things. We do have a partnership with a horse place that's a ranch that's called Acres of Hope. And so we do take students there and they get to learn about horses and ride horses and groom the horses and that sort of thing. And so that's kind of therapeutic for some of the kids. We just got through building a huge shop behind the back of the property. And during the summer for one of the clubs, the kids built it. They literally helped pour the concrete, build forms, build the walls, everything. And we just finished painting it, and the electricians are going to come in and finish that part. But there's a giant lift in there. And we have a mechanics club. And we have a local mechanic that comes in and teaches kids how to work on cars. And so we do get a lot of donations of cars, and then we flip them, and the kids work on them. So yeah, they learn a trade. So those are a few of the things. We constantly, every day though, there are like, we feed, 100 kids a day at least. And so we just got our own food program. And so we are feeding the kids every single day, and then Monday through Friday. And then there's volleyball going on, and dodgeball, laser tag, all that good stuff at the same time too.
Yeah. So tell me how you guys, how are y'all able to feed all of those kiddos? Do you guys have a
So
partnership? Do you guys have a
yeah,
kitchen? What's up?
so we do have a massive kitchen. So as a youth pastor, when I went in there to check the place out, I'm like, oh my goodness, look at this kitchen. This is insane. This is like better than any church I've ever been into, right? And and then I went into the storage area, and that place was huge with all the stuff for kids. I'm like, yeah. So, but anyways, we had a partnership with the local high school with their food program. We were on their grant that they had, and so we just recently got our own grant. But we would go across the street every day, and they would give us certain foods, and we had to serve. We have to serve everything that is on that, and then if they want to throw it away, we try to get some of it back and try to put it back into circulation, that sort of thing. So, but now we have our own thing going on with that, so that we can feed the kids through that grant.
I've gotten to know a couple of different not-for-profits, a couple of different people who are doing some things up in the Northwest. And I feel like you guys do a really good job of combining forces, whether it's through a nonprofit and a church or through a couple of different not-for-profits. Can you just kind of tell me, like, what's it like to serve up in the Northwest, and how essential are those partnerships for you guys?
Yeah, they're very essential. As you might know, that Oregon is one of the most unchurched states in the United States. So there is some opposition. Occasionally you'll see stuff on social media about separation of church and state, and our role. Most people in the community, whether Christians or not, they love that we're there, and what we provide. We're not preaching at the kids. If they want to stay for extra stuff, they can, and then we can share Jesus. But if a kid ever asks where our hope lies, we can share that, and we won't shy away from that. But the partnerships, I think, with the schools are just amazing. They love us on their campus. This year, we have 2 to 3 staff that are actually at the middle school every day, and same with the high school. So during lunch, they're there hanging out with them, and the principals are like, "Thank you for being here." And they're also like, "Hey, how can we figure out a way to combine efforts a little bit more so with the mentoring program?" Because the college is doing a mentoring program as well, and they're trying to find space to do it and all that. So we're trying to figure out a way that we can work as a team to mentor these kids.
Yeah. What are some good ways for, like, if you're a nonprofit or if you're a mentoring organization and you want to partner with the school, what are some good ways to kind of get in good with them to try to, I guess, not just take from them, but also try to give something in return to them?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to one of your podcasts from way back, where you had a gentleman that actually just started volunteering in the school, and then it turned into something much more, just by showing up and like, how can I help, right? And using his strengths to volunteer in that aspect. Now, most youth pastors, if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, they would be on campus during lunch, and they're there to hang out with kids, bring a pizza, throw it down on a table, and you got 10 new best friends. And so going in there to, like, I guess if you're doing ministry of any sort, your motivation should be, how can I serve, and not what I get in return. We're not trying to grow our numbers at the gate. We're trying to change lives. So if a kid never comes to the gate, but we can go on the school campus and connect with a kid, that's what it's all about. And I like, if as a youth pastor, I don't care what church they go to. I just want them to know Jesus. I want them to know they matter. So you got to get rid of yourself and not worry about your numbers, and worry about his numbers.
That's awesome, Dale. Man, that's such a good reminder. I know for me, so often whenever I'm running the not-for-profit, I can get so fixated on the numbers and on, oh my gosh, am I making an impact? Am I showing all of my donors that I'm da, 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 da? And at the end of the day, it's just about loving kids. It's
Uh-huh.
just about telling them about Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And
Who?
because you don't ever know what's going to happen from that, you know what I'm saying? And so, what's more important, 500 kids coming to your after school, or 10 kids who are falling passionately head over heels in love with Jesus Christ, and they get radically transformed, and their families do in generations, and then their kids and their kids' kids. So you just never know what the Lord's up to.
Right. And he's the one providing for you anyway. So I think we get worried about the money and the numbers and how am I going to look and success and all that stuff when you're looking at the wrong thing for success. And God knows our heart and he'll take care of us.
So Dale, so you have been doing this almost as long as I've been alive. And so, so man, just like, what is mentoring to you? What is discipleship? What are some of your, you know?
Yeah, it's getting harder and harder as the years have gone by because of the fact that, like, I remember when I started youth ministry, there's a kid that was a little rough around the edges, and I also own a photography business, and I got hired to do this big project, and I had to go to the coast and take pictures there, hot air balloons taking off from another part of town, and I had this big list of things I needed to take pictures of for this client, and I just grabbed this kid. There was a youth group that was really rough around the edges, and I said, "Hey, man, go with me." And so we spent the day together cruising, an hour and a half to the beach, taking pictures, an hour and a half back, and just windshield time. That kid he had a rough go. He became a pastor at one point after he completely blew out when he was younger, and then he became a pastor. And I just ran into him recently, and it was just like, oh my gosh, there's this guy with his family, and it's just so cool to reconnect. But nowadays, I can't just grab a kid and hop in the car and go cruise around and do life with them. I got to think about, okay, I have to have other staff, other people with me, and have things signed off and all that. And you got to worry about accusations and all that stuff. And so right now, the way it works is we will walk a kid over to McDonald's, which is right next to us, and we'll sit down and we'll have meetings there, or the Froyo place, or Subway, and we'll have meetings there. Or if there's a room across from the quiet room that we can leave the doors open and we can hang out in there and have a meeting. So we got to make sure that it's in an open public place to meet with them. But I have done where hey, I just need to go. And I heard this in one of the podcasts where go grocery shopping, right? And so I took a kid to the grocery store. I'm like, hey, we're going camping this weekend. Come with me. And we walked over there and we got groceries and we got to talk and have our meeting then. And so that was very productive. And so it looks like a lot of different things. Sometimes I think once we got a new Xbox or something like that, and we just played Call of Duty together. And so, but we meet every single week for an hour. I know what's going on in these kids' lives. So if 1 week we just want to screw around and play video games, we can do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. So often I feel this stress and this kind of pressure of oh my gosh, I've only got an hour with them. We have to talk about Jesus. We got to talk about school. We got to talk about their, da, 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 da. And I think from time to time, it's really good just to have fun.
Yeah.
And just to relax and, hey, look, we don't have to talk about your faith this week. I mean, obviously, if a kid wants to talk about it, yes, that's awesome. But I don't have to talk about schoolwork. I'm not going to try to teach you anything. Let's just play Xbox. Let's just shoot hoops. Let's just get a smile on that face. And I have found that sometimes whenever I feel like I'm the least productive, those are the times that they open up the most.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's just doing life with them. We used to have a thing called D Squared, and it was dinner with Dale on Sundays at my house. And those were the kids that really wanted to go a little bit further in their walk. And so we had about 30 middle schoolers that would come to my house. We'd do dinner, and we would do some sort of teaching or a game or something like that. But I'd take the boys out in the garage. The girls would stay inside, and my wife would take the girls. I'd take the boys. But in doing that, they got to see me do life with my family. My daughters were there. They were younger. And me interact with my wife. And And like, yeah, they caught a lot. I was just thinking of the two podcasts ago, I think maybe, where you guys had, it wasn't a Seder dinner, it was the other Jewish holiday
Yeah.
dinner. And, and,
Yeah.
and
The
you're
Sabbath.
like, yeah, and you were like, yeah, that was pretty lame for you, huh? And he's like, no, that was awesome. So I mean, just doing life with you, they pick up so much. And then they tell you later on, it's like, I've had kids like 15 years later. You remember when you said this? I'm like, I really don't. And they're like, really impacted me. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh man, it is so nuts how like all the things that I think the kids are like, oh man, this is gonna rock his world. It's like, and then
Oh, yeah.
I'll make some like side comment. They're like, whoa, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
all right,
Yeah,
Lord.
I put some stuff together for certain kids sometimes when I'm doing the message or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this could be so deep. And they're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, so we were talking earlier about, or maybe it was in your bio that you sent me earlier, but you mentioned how uh, the Lord has really stirred up your heart for the fatherless.
Yeah.
Do you mind kind of
Yeah. So
talking a bit more about that?
I have 3 daughters, and they've always, they bring their friends over, and one of them we've pretty much adopted, one of their best friends, and so holidays and everything we've done together. She's since moved to Tennessee and got married, but before that, I mean, every holiday we were together. Family photos, she's in them, and she didn't have a dad in her life, and then her grandpa passed away, who was like a dad to her, and when he passed away, we actually moved out of town. We ended up coming back, but when we left, I just felt so guilty that we were leaving her, because she did not have that father figure. I had a dad growing up. I had the dad that whooped my butt when I needed it. He gave me hugs and kisses goodnight too, rubbed his beard on me, did all that weird stuff, and embarrassed us when we were, driving in the car or at restaurants. But, we're in church. He'd reach over and grab my knee and squeeze the crap out of it if I was messing around, and you knew you were going to get your butt whooped when you got home. But he loved us as well. And so, and my wife, that wasn't the same for hers. Her biological dad went to jail when she was very, very young for horrendous things he did to his children from her previous marriage and the kids. So that has always stuck with me because I've had a dad that I know what it's like to be loved, and seeing those who do not have that wrecks me. And so I did I worked 7 years with Men in the Arena, and I loved going to those conferences, Iron Sharpens Iron, around the United States, and Jim Ramos would speak to the men, and men would get just messed up, and it's like, okay, time to step up and lead my family. And I get frustrated when fathers are not leading their families, and fathers who don't put guardrails in their life so that they don't spin out, so that they don't have affairs, and they don't leave their families. And then when they leave, they desecrate the family. And too many times too, oh, the devil got me, this and that. Well, no, you did. Stop giving the devil so much credit. It's because you kept living your life unchecked. And so it breaks my heart to see kids who don't have dads. And most of the kids that we see at the gate do not have fathers that are engaged in their lives. They're not pointing them to Jesus, or their dads are completely gone. Kids who have been in abusive relationships or have had abusive fathers, a lot of them are questioning their sexuality, their gender, and all that stuff. And so, if dads step up and start doing what they're called to do by the Lord and lead their families and lead it right, then these kids will be fine. And a lot of those kids that have that healthy father in their home, we don't necessarily see at the gate that much. They come to Tuesday lunch where they walk across the street just for lunch, but then they're gone. But they don't come after school because they have healthy things they're doing.
Yeah. And I was at getting some food the other day at good old Chipotle, and I was standing in line next to this kid, and he was a cool looking kid. He had like long hair, he had on like his hat backwards, and so I'm just sitting there in line, and I was like, man, this kid has to go to Baylor. Like, he is just, so I started talking to him, and he's a baseball player. And we talked for, 5 or 7 minutes, and he's asking me a bunch of questions. And this kid is so articulate. Like, he's asking me a bunch of questions, and he's engaged, and he's making eye contact. And I am just like, this kid is a stud. Like, he is so much more mature than I am. And I just asked him, I was like, hey, man, why don't you tell me about your dad? And this like smile came on his face. And he's like,
Yeah.
oh, dude, my dad's my best friend. And he just went on about how his dad mentored him and discipled him and took him on hunting trips and taught him how to, do all these things. And I was like, dude, it is so obvious. Like, it is so obvious that you're 21 years old and you are engaged, you're asking good questions, you're secure, and that's all because of your dad. And
Yeah.
then, like, I think about myself and how much I feel like I've, put in some work, but growing up without a dad, even though I've done the work, even though I have the books and I try to follow Jesus to the best of my ability, it still comes up. And I'm like, man, it is such a big deal. Hey,
Yeah.
so for people who are mentors, how important is it for them to surround themselves with other people who can encourage them?
Yeah. Again, I listened to the podcast where your mentor, you interviewed your mentor, or you didn't interview your mentor, but yeah, he was mentored, and he had ALS.
Yeah, he has it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and after that podcast, I was like, and I started thinking about my staff, and I started thinking about myself, and I'm like, I have a lot of men in my life that speak into my life that will that I can go to for stuff and this and that. But then I started thinking about it, like, I don't have like a mentor who I would say this is my mentor. So I had lunch yesterday with a man that I respect, and I see how one of his kids works for us, and I see how he carries himself. He's a chaplain, and I see how his kids are, his wife is, and knowing about his time with the Lord and in prayer and in the Bible and all that stuff. And I said, I just want to throw this out here. Will you be a mentor for me? And we meet once a week, once a month, twice a week, twice a month, whatever, whatever you're willing to do. I want you to ask me hard questions. And a lot of times I have friends that I can tell them that I'm thinking about doing something or whatever, and they will just go along with it. And then later on, like, if it didn't work out, like, yeah, I didn't think that was a good idea. And I'm like, bro, why didn't you tell me that? So I want that person in my life that's going to that I meet with. It's like, I don't think that's a good idea. Right. And so, I'm working on entering into that relationship. And I told my staff after listening to that podcast, I'm like, I want you guys to all find a mentor. You're mentoring multiple children. Who's mentoring you? And that's so important that you find somebody to mentor you. And so they're all on the search now to try to figure out who that is.
That's awesome. You have to be filled up before out, my man. So,
You do.
super cool. Well, Dale, do you think you could finish up our time with just give me your favorite story of a kid, of life transformation, of how you've seen the Lord work at the gate?
Yeah. This is where my boss is like, you going to cry on the podcast? I'm like, maybe. But we had a volunteer appreciation dinner and staff appreciation dinner on Sunday, and I kind of lost it when I was sharing with them some stories about what's happened this last year, because God is just so good and doing such good stuff. But we had one night, there was a kid that called up the gate, and it was after a youth group. And he's being mentored by one of our staff, Casey. And he called up to say his brother is in the hospital and he needs a transplant. And it doesn't look good. And so we were like, oh, man, like, this kid could die. And he's like, so can you pray for my brother? And so the kid that called is one of our mentees. And he is a male, and he refers to himself as a female and has changed his name to a girl's name. And, he called up and asked for prayer. And we're like, yeah, we'll pray. And so Casey said, all right, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to start. You're going to pray. And then Dale's going to close us out. And he was like, what do I say? And he's going, well, just talk to God like he's a friend. And and so Casey prayed, and then it was like a little little gap in time, and he's like, hey God. And so he prayed, and then I closed it out, and I looked at Casey and I just high-fived him. I'm like, dude, that was awesome. He knew where to go because he knows where our hope lies. And his brother came home and he had the transplant, and he's at school now. And so I'm like, what a testimony that God allowed us to be a part of. It's pretty cool. Another one is, it was shortly after I started working at the gate, this girl, we'll just call her Brenda because that's her name. I was sitting at the front desk, and we rotate through jobs that we do. And Brenda sat down next to me, and she knew that I'd lost my mom, and she had recently lost her dad. And so we talked about that a little bit. And she stayed a little sore with God about taking her dad. And she looked at me and she goes, Dale, I don't believe in God. And I was like, okay, well, he can handle that. But that doesn't change how much he loves you, how crazy he is about you, and the plan that he's got for your life. So you just hang in there and you'll see that he's good. And she just looked at me like I was weird. And so we just continued this relationship, hanging out with Brenda whenever she's there. And then she started just giving me hugs when she'd come in, and she'd go, Dale, you're my white dad at the gate. She's Hispanic. And so I'm her white dad at the gate. And then we had spring break camp. She's like, no, I'm not going to no spring break camp. And so we just kept loving her. And then she brought her friend, a friend of hers that was coming and hanging out. They ended up breaking up, and they were like not friends anymore. And then we were able to facilitate a reunification, making things better. Well, her and her friend are hanging out. We're loving both of them. And they ended up their leader said, hey, I'm going to go to camp, summer camp. Will you go? And they were going, all right, we'll go. So we ended up scholarship. Took him to camp. While we were at camp, Brenda's friend one night, she was like, hey, I think I want to sing. And she was singing during the worship songs. And my boss, Ben, was like, hey, I saw your lips moving. What's going on there? She goes, I saw your lips moving too. You know. While they're at camp, they both basically surrendered their life to Jesus. And Brenda's friend started singing with the worship team there. And I'm like, I took a picture of it. I sent it to our program director. I'm like, I'm not crying. I am not crying right now, but this is cool as I'm crying. And so we get home, and we're like, we're going to do baptisms. And so at this after school program that we have, we ended up doing youth group on a Thursday night, and we baptized 5 kids. And both of those girls were part of it. And we ended up giving them Bibles. They were so excited. They're serving now with the middle schoolers for me, and on the worship team. And they do so much. And while we were at camp, when Brenda's friend, Fabiola, fell in love with Jesus, her whole countenance changed. She was smiling like insane amounts. And we were all going, what is going on with her? She does not smile. And so her life just changed. And then it was a couple weeks later, we got to baptize 2 other kids. That one was, his mom was praying for him like crazy. And he was in trouble with the law. And we read his testimony, and there wasn't a dry eye in the crowd because he was just apologizing to everybody he's ever hurt. And he got baptized. And when he came out of the water, he just hugged me real tight and just hugged everybody. And it was just, I think we just offered him a job. So God's doing some great stuff. And all it is us loving one kid at a time as they walk through the doors, looking them in the eye, saying their name, and just caring about them.
Well, there's some testimonies, Dale. Man.
Yeah.
You guys keep up the good work over there at the gate. If people want to get a hold of you, tell them how to do that.
Yeah. My email is real easy. It's discipleshipdirector@thegateyouth.org. And the gate is just thegateyouth.org, www.thegateyouth.org. And you'll find us and be able to see some things we're doing. And we're constantly wanting to learn. So, if you're a mentor, just press in to being able to learn as much as you can.
That's awesome, Dale, man. Don't y'all grow weary of doing good. You guys are doing good work, man.
Yeah.
Well, Dale, it has been a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and for your stories. Just got me good, Dale. Got me good. So
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys want to share this with some of your mentoring friends, we'd appreciate it. Follow us on social media, rate the podcast. And if you forgot everything that you just heard, well, that's a shame. But remember this, you can mentor.